Let me ask you something. Have you ever been to the Nauvoo Pageant, like the newer Nauvoo Pageant that happens every summer? Well, I have not yet been there. Although I've been to Nauvoo several times, I got to make it sometime for the Nauvoo Pageant. And that's what we're focusing on in this episode is the leadership of the Nauvoo Pageant, or at least some of the leadership. We talk with Cynthia Collier, who is the director of the Nauvoo Pageant, and Amy Richardson, who is a dance instructor. And they do miracles, okay, to get people through this process and put on a great show that's impactful and transformational. We want to give a shout out to Rachel Grout, who sent us an email recommending we reach out to Cynthia and Amy. This is what she said. I listen to most of your podcasts and enjoy most that I listen to. I just wanted to make a suggestion for guests. This summer, my family participated as family cast in the Nauvoo Pageant. One of the most impressive things about the pageant is the director staff, especially the director, Cynthia Collier, and the dance instructor, Amy Richardson. I was amazed at how they helped us go from clueless to performing in only a week, without even a negative comment. They are always so positive and helpful. My family fell in love with the dance instructor when she was talking and people were having their own conversations on the side. Instead of asking them to be quiet and move it elsewhere, and ask them to join us. When a bunch of teenage boys were goofing off playing leapfrog behind her, which was obviously very distracting for the rest of us, she told them they were awesome. She asked them to join our discussion, and she would try to think of whether that could fit in the pageant anywhere. Then, right before a performance, she called those boys up and worked out with them a fun place they could do leapfrog as part of the pageant. I loved that she followed through and wasn't just flattering them to get the desired behavior. I had a long discussion towards the end of our time there with the director about how I could apply for her skills to my primary presidency, where we also have teachers and children who have volunteered, and we want to respect that. But we also need them to do what they've committed to. It was very helpful. Anyways, I think you would have a great conversation on your podcast with these two, and that we did. I'm so excited for you to hear this. And I even asked at one point in the interview about primary programs. What advice, as the Nauvoo Pageant, expertise, what advice would you give to primary presidencies? Maybe putting together a primary program or working with children, those things. And their answers are phenomenal, inspiring. They even tell some really miraculous stories that have come from the Nauvoo Pageant, and somebody needs to write a book. Maybe they've already written a book, but another book about all the miracles that come from these pageants, both those that participate and those that observe. So I've talked long enough. Let's get into the interview. Here's my interview with Cynthia Collier and Amy Richardson. All right, a unique episode for sure. I have the opportunity to interview Amy Robinson and Cynthia Collier, who are both part of the Nauvoo Pageant. We'll get into the details of how you're involved, but maybe Amy, let's start with you. Just give us a quick bio. Who are you? Where do you live, and how did you get involved in the Nauvoo Pageant?
Great, sure. Yes, so I'm Amy Robinson. I was born and raised in Salt Lake City, went to BYU, did some dancing there. I've danced growing up. That's kind of part of my story and relevant. And I am married, have 6 children. We've lived kind of all over the place. We've lived in London, we've lived in Houston, we've lived in San Diego. We enjoy moving for some reason. And we currently
Nice.
live in Bountiful, Utah. And so I'm quite happy there. I have been part of the pageant. Originally got involved because there's also a British pageant. There's a Nauvoo pageant and a British pageant. The British pageant started in 2013, and I was living in London at the time. And so was asked to kind of help as they created that pageant. And Cynthia did as well. Cynthia did the writing. I'll let her tell about that. And I was helping with the choreography because there is dancing involved. So
yeah, for sure.
Was really awesome opportunity to be part of that and to kind of meet the saints in England and Scotland and Wales, Ireland. They came together for that pageant. So that was kind of my first experience in 2013 to be part of the start of that. And then came to Nauvoo pageant when they decided to do the Nauvoo pageant and the British pageant in Nauvoo. And so came and helped as they set that on a different stage and did a few edits there, and then was kind of away from it for a while as I moved around, and then have been back a couple of summers in the past couple of summers to help teach the choreography to the incoming family cast. They have different family casts that come in and learn 1 week and perform the next week. And so I teach the dancing every day. It's super fun. Yeah, it's really fun.
So
I dance a day.
you've been involved with church pageants for about 11 years. Is it like, say, it's 2013?
Yeah, that's when I started, but I haven't been in it the entire time. Just kind of got started there and then have poked my head in a couple of times.
So, awesome. Yeah. Cynthia, what's your background? Put yourself into context.
Yeah. Well, I grew up in a family that performed. My mother was a writer, composer, director, choreographer. She did it all. And she liked to use her kids as cast. And so I had exposure to a lot of stuff growing up. Thought I might go into that as I got into my young adulthood, but really it never went that way. I went into college and went a different route. I was more in the English, humanities, philosophy area, music, did a lot of music. So I was more on the big ideas, the background side, the big thoughts, and did a little writing here and there. But in 1999, I got invited to be on a committee to prepare a new production for the Conference Center Theater, which was a late addition to the Conference Center. And the decision was made that when they initiated that new theater, they would initiate a new production, which ended up being Savior of the World. Maybe some of your listeners have
I've seen it.
It's into awesome. It, or heard of it. And so it was called onto a team to help create that script and that production. And from there, my involvement with these live productions for the church has continued. So worked on Savior of the World and some other things. And then when the Nauvoo Pageant, the old City of Joseph Pageant, was retired, and the First Presidency turned to this group to help create a new Nauvoo Pageant. And I have been, like Amy, I've been tucking in and out ever since.
Yeah.
My first year directing was 2017. Prior to that, I was more on the assisting writing side of things. So.
Mm-hmm. So Cynthia, you are the director, or you're part of a team of directors, or how do you?
At present, I'm the lead artistic director. I should say I have been. Don't know what's happening in 2025. Is that what's coming up? But several other people have preceded me from whom I've learned a great deal and been very blessed to be able to work with.
Awesome. And then Amy, so it sounds like you do all things dance and choreography type of stuff.
Yes, that's right. So we call it choreography. It mostly has been choreographed. It stays the same. The dancing is the same. But then, so then my role is to, like I said, just teach the different families. And it's about a cast of 150 people. So there's lots of parts and lots of involvement with children and the cast. So it's really fun.
Maybe we should describe how this goes.
Yeah, please.
Kurt,
let's do that.
Because this is probably a feature of that pageant that a lot of people are surprised to learn about. So when the new Nauvoo Pageant was instigated, it was felt that it would be good for the city of Nauvoo if they had smaller crowds for a longer period of time. That would help them. They wouldn't get such an onslaught of 10,000 people in town for a few nights. Rather than that, they'd get a couple of thousand over a period of a month. But the challenge with that is that one of the greatest assets that church pageants has had are these wonderful members who are willing to come and dedicate their vacation time, their resources to be a part of that and participate on stage. And no family really, and few individuals can afford to go and be in a production for 4 weeks out of the summer. So the concept of a rotating cast was created. So a family will audition, or not audition, but rather apply to be in the pageant. And then when they arrive, they spend a week rehearsing and a week performing while a new cast arrives and starts rehearsing. So there's a core cast of about 22 people who stay all summer, and they're the ones that have the speaking lines. But these families rotate in and out. So as Amy said, over the course of a summer, we can work with 500 or 600 people, directing them and teaching them their role and learning from them as well. And it's an intense schedule. Amy is teaching those dances new every week to a new group of people.
Yeah, we learn a dance a day. And
Wow.
then
That's
plus
fun.
then we have the other cast that's kind of refining their experience on stage. We're blocking through it, and then in the afternoons we teach the new cast. So there's lots going on.
And as I do these interviews, I'm always sort of trying to dig and mine for certain leadership principles that come up. So I'm just thinking like this is a complicated machine that's got all sorts of moving parts, and new people, new blood, every week or so that's maybe adding a different characteristic to it. And so like what advice, like if someone was to replace you in your role this coming summer, hopefully that doesn't happen, hopefully you're there a long time, but if like what are some general principles that come to mind as far as just the operation and managing this type of orchestration?
Well, I would say that it's a process that is being planned all year long. The artistic part that we do becomes intense starting in January, which is when we audition our core cast. And it takes about a couple of months to get them all selected and in place. And then we begin working with them toward the summer. And in the background, it is in the background, but it's absolutely crucial, essential work. Sometimes the most essential people are the least seen, right? We have a pageant leadership team. Right now, that's Chris and Wayne Larson, and they are responsible with their assistants. They have 3 assistant couples right now, and they organize a huge group of volunteers who plan all year long, have interactions with municipal leaders in Nauvoo and church leaders there and elsewhere, and prepare the ground. They are the ones who actually select the family casts that want to come and perform on stage, and organize all that, communicate with them. We have a couple of missionary couples in Nauvoo that support that, and it is a huge operation. And then we have a stage management team and a production team that are planning all those aspects of it all year long. And so there's a lot that happens before we ever get our feet on the ground in Nauvoo. Amy, what would you add to that?
Yeah, I guess there's so many, like you were saying, there's so many details. What Cynthia and I do, we get to be seen, and we stand on the stage and we talk to the people a lot, but we could not do our job. I mean, nothing would happen without the web that's happening behind it, like the people setting up the grounds, the women sewing the buttons. There's an amazing sewing operation that happens where they turn in the costumes, they wash them all in one night, they sew on the buttons, they fix the hems, they rip out the hems so that the new people can then be fitted into their costumes in a beautiful way. I mean, down to the stitch, right? There are so many people and so many hands involved. So I'm replaceable, really, but there's so many people that touch, fingertip to fingertip, right? That hold the whole thing up, basically. So it's a beautiful web of Zion, really.
Yeah.
People working together.
I think maybe you mentioned you said like 150. Was that like to put on the production, you need about 150 people like on the stage.
So there's
at some
about
point?
maybe like 120 that come
That rotate
roughly,
in.
that rotate in, and then maybe what is
And
it, Cynthia? Like 30,
about 22 to 25 on stage that
Okay.
that stay all summer.
And then apart from them, how many in this web that you've described, as far as everybody from volunteers to directors and production people?
I should know that number, but
But it's a lot.
I would say there's a couple hundred people there.
Oh wow!
Helping
Okay.
doing support roles. Probably 50 of them are in the sewing room, and
there's like 10 of them under the stage, or
we've got
doing the lights. We've got 18. Yeah.
A crew of 12 or 15 under the stage, running all the technical things. We've got light people up in the light towers. We've got people doing security all night long, looking after the facility to make sure it's safe. We've got
people running the country fair.
That's right.
Yeah.
Huge crew, a big crew of people running the country fair. That is the opportunity for the audience to meet the cast before they go on stage, which helps. It's part of the whole objective of the pageant, is to build real relationships with the people who come. And so, just tons of people that are. There's language translation. There's I'm sure I'm forgetting some crucial things right now.
So, but there's a lot of people. When you say several hundred people, I think that helps at least put it into perspective a little bit. And I would imagine, are the vast majority of them volunteer missionaries? Are there some employed or paid for doing this stuff? Or
a very few are missionaries, a few are paid, and I'd say by the grand number are volunteers.
Okay,
by far, awesome. Probably 90% or more.
Yeah. Now, if I interviewed a member of the pageant presidency for the British pageant, so I imagine that's the same thing. There's a pageant presidency that, as far as has been set apart and sort of has quote unquote authority over jurisdiction over the pageant. Is that accurate?
Nowadays, in Nauvoo at least, they have changed the terminology. The name is now the Pageant Leadership.
Oh, okay.
That's the group. There's 3 couples. Well, they've added a 4th this year, but these three of them are strictly over the pageants. And with the Larsons at the helm, they're the chair and the co-chair of the pageants. And then the other 2 couples are called their assistants. So, but it's functioning the same. They've been set apart, and they have ecclesiastical. They're in the ecclesiastical line for looking after this event.
Gotcha. How would you describe just your engagement with them? Because obviously they're probably not on stage saying, "Oh no, he needs more gusto in the way he read that line," or whatever, right? That's your job, or the dancing, right? They're not critiquing the tap dancing or the whatever it's going on, right? So, how does that engagement happen, or what does that look like as the operations go on?
I would say, and Amy, you could add to this. I would say they're ministers. They want to make sure everyone's okay. They're looking after people's housing situations. They're looking after their well-being, the health. They're looking after their safety. They are looking after. They are a huge part of organizing it, scheduling everything, looking after schedules, resolving schedule conflicts. They're doing all the hard work.
Yeah. Anything you'd add to that, Amy, or is that something?
No, that's right. They're kind of the puppet masters, right? They've got all the strings, and they're trying to make sure that everything is working together. I've seen them before the show starts. They're out in the audience, making sure down to, like, I saw them filling mud puddles one time. There was big, huge holes, and they were figuring out how to do that so people could safely get to their seats without stepping in the mud. I mean, they do everything.
Yeah. So, that's great. So, Amy, I'm curious, so every week you get a new group of families that have come to town, and you got to teach them how to dance.
Right. That's what they're worried about. They come in pretty worried that's what I'm going to do, is try to teach them how to dance.
In fact, we have a special name for dance if you want to tell them about that.
That's right. So we prefer to call it moving with joy, so that nobody feels like they're behind the curve, right? Everyone can move with joy, right? Even if they haven't taken a dance class. So that's right. Yeah.
Nice. Anything come to mind as far as, like, what has worked to, do you feel like this pressure of teaching them really fast, or do you feel like you're given, like, that week is, we'll just take one step at a time, quite literally, and you'll get there? Or have you learned some tricks to really accelerating the process?
Yeah, it is an accelerated process. It really is. We have there are 2 pageants. They learn 2 full-length shows, right? A Nauvoo pageant and a British pageant, telling the stories of these saints and how they come together. And so in the Nauvoo pageant, we have 2 dances, and in the British pageant, we have 3 dances. And so they need to learn 5 dances in the week, and not just learn them, but be able to perform them by the next Monday, right? So it's an accelerated process. And I think that we first just try, I think like I was mentioning, I think the first thing is just to let them know that it can be done, right? And so just to put their minds at ease that this is for the dances actually have been created for everybody. And so we kind of just put them at ease to know that it's been done before, it'll be done again. They have everything they need to do it, and they've been crafted in a way that that anybody can do it. And then of course we also have people who may have disabilities. We have people that are maybe working through that. And then also we have old to young people and everything in between, back issues, leg issues, whatever. It's a raked stage. There are lots of variables. So I guess, but what I've noticed is such a beautiful thing that we have kind of dances come, they give everyone a purpose. And the purpose is to dance, but also the purpose of the dance is to one, tell the story that we're trying to tell and represent the people, but also number two is to have joy and to show is really to worship through our dance. And so when we look at it and in that perspective and kind of change the paradigm, that we're not trying to make sure that as soon as they kind of recognize that I'm not there saying, hey, left foot, I said left foot, that instead it's about what are we showing here? What kind of energy do we bring to this, and what part of the story is this, right? And so I think that's kind of the angle that we take is more about the feeling of it, and what's beautiful about that is that then the details come together, right? The counts do come together, and it actually paints the picture of the community, which is really the point of it anyway. The point of the dances is to show these relationships between the people and the joy that they felt in following their testimony, following their faith, to make kind of big movements in their life, right? And so these big movements on stage can reflect that.
Yeah, that's helpful. Anything she's missed, Cynthia, that you would add? Or?
Well, I'll tell you what I was thinking about as Amy was talking is, the people arrive really nervous. Very often, sometimes it's a dad that's led the way, but more often it's a mom that has said, we're going to go do this, family. And
drag everybody else along.
And drag the teenagers and dad along. And the kids seem to always be kind of happy to do it. But people come in really nervous. And one of the first experiences that they have when they arrive is to watch it be performed by the cast that's performing. And after they watch that, we have to take care that they aren't walking away overwhelmed, because
I could never do that, right?
It's like, there's no way I'm going to be up there in a week doing all that. And so, of course, we do have a really carefully crafted schedule and a high awareness of what needs to be accomplished by when in order to get all the work done. But about halfway through the week, we usually start hearing comments from people like, you guys are being so nice. And, I just blew it royally up there. I'm so sorry. And we're always saying, I didn't see a problem. And they're like, why don't you ever, get upset when we make mistakes? And this process that was instituted a couple of decades ago has been really committed to the idea that we can't show or express the joy of the saints in Nauvoo in the 1840s if we don't have it ourselves. And so our leadership style is really built on this idea that we are looking for joy and we are looking for growth, and that everybody's got something to contribute to it, and that even the leaders aren't always the experts. Some of our very best ideas have come out of participants, whether that be core cast or sometimes family cast, or, who knows from what direction a great idea will come. But we go in there with a learning mindset. Yes, we have some expertise, but we're not complete experts. And we learn all the time from these amazing people who bring their whole selves. And, when you're learning something, mistakes are expected. And one of the best things about mistakes is that it shows us what our next steps need to be. So it's really wonderful in that way. And beyond that, We're not looking to show the audience a group of perfect people up there. We want to show them people who love each other and who love God and who are trying to build Zion. And so our rehearsal process has to be like that too. Otherwise, that spirit of Zion can't attend the performance,
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, that's really helpful. Anything else, Amy, that came to mind while Cynthia was talking, or?
Yeah. Well, I mean, just to follow up, she said it so beautifully as she always does. I think I love seeing, like she was saying, kind of the end result as they go through the week more and more. This confidence grows that what they've brought. We kind of tell, we say this offer, they really are bringing an offering with their time, with their faith, to just come and do this thing that they're not sure they can do, right? But this beautiful thing happens that their faith and their kind of, as they work with each other, this confidence grows and this joy really does grow, so that by the time they go to on stage, they really enjoy what they're doing, and they feel this kinship with each other, and they are able to, I mean, I haven't seen a cast fail yet, quote unquote, right?
Yeah.
That they really do feel that spirit and are able to project it as they move, as they any movements they make on stage, whether it's blocking, regular blocking, or the official dancing. So it's a beautiful process.
I know there's always just those tender mercies in any process like this that sometimes seems overcomplicated or well above the abilities of the people involved. I'm just curious, does a specific story come to mind for either of you of someone who sort of went through this and miracles that showed up, or what comes to mind?
every day.
Oh wow, there's so
Yeah.
many.
I'll tell one. This is one that stands for many others. I don't think the people would mind me telling this, that we had a wonderful family, the Beard family, that came and participated one year. We didn't know until they arrived that Brother Beard had a disability. He was born with cerebral palsy, and he has a beautiful story. I'll try to tell it briefly. That he was born in Vermont. He had a wonderful father, I think, who I've never met, but I just think from hearing this story, he must have been a great man, and his goal was to help his son to grow up and be independent, even though he had many limitations. It was hard even to understand his speech, not to mention his movements. But there came a time where he was 18 or so, and the father took him and arranged for him to have a job out in Nevada. So they took a cross-country trip. They stopped in Salt Lake City to see the sights, including Temple Square. And in the course of that visit, this young man was able to ask for a Book of Mormon from the missionaries there, a sister missionary. And they said that they would have someone deliver it to him. And summer ended. He went on to his job, and then the summer ended. He went home to Vermont. It took about 6 months in those days for the missionary to arrive at his door with that Book of Mormon. And long story short, he was baptized. And sometime later, he had a chance to start an email relationship with another young Latter-day Saint. And their relationship went on by email for about a year. And she finally said, "Don't you think we should meet?" And he said, "Well, there's something you need to know about me." And he told her about his disability, because he had not disclosed that prior to that time, nor had they talked or anything. And so they ended up getting married. And they raised a fantastically beautiful family that they brought to perform in the Nauvoo Pageant with us. And one day, out on the field, the pre-show field where all of the pioneer activities are, he told his story to one of our volunteers there. And she said, "Well, when was that?" And he told her the year. And she says, "Well, I was a missionary there at that time." "Who was the missionary that gave it to you?" And he says, "I have no idea." And she says, "Well, I was a careful journal keeper. I'm going to go home and find my journals, and I'm going to see if I can find out who your missionary was." And she did do that. And she went home, and she found an entry in her journal of a very tender experience of meeting a young man with a disability. And in short, she wrote him and said, or she called him up probably and said, "I was your missionary."
Wow.
And
That's cool.
and it's marvelous. It's miraculous. Nauvoo is a place where people gather, where the saints kind of take pilgrimage, and things like that happen all the time. You meet people you were meant to meet. The people cross paths there, where the Lord has been organizing their lives in such a way that miraculous crossings take place, meetings and re-meetings. And the same is true with the pageant.
Yeah.
People have interactions before and after the pageant with cast members. Cast members have the great experience of being able to share the gospel with people who they go on and have a part in conversions sometimes, and or even just keep wonderful relationships with people.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a room somewhere with a wall full of wedding announcements, right? Of people who've met, or
Yes.
those types of things. Amy, any stories, experiences of the tender mercies you experienced there?
There are so many, like Cynthia said. I was just kind of thinking through if I could. There's so many I to choose from. I guess I could tell a personal story, if that's okay. A tender mercy for me. The last time I had been to, it was 2022, and I hadn't been, like I said, I kind of was involved in 2013 and maybe 2014 or 15 when it went to Nauvoo, and I hadn't really been involved. Got a call from Cynthia, and she asked if I could come and help with the dancing, and I was so excited in 2022. But at the time that she called me, I was unable to walk. I had the strangest, unexplained to this day. I had maybe an infection in my tooth, and I took some antibiotics, and it kind of threw something off of whack, and I had a whole range of problems, ending with my ankle was so painful. It was so painful, like off the charts, painful. I could not walk on it. Cynthia didn't really know this, and I didn't really disclose that because I said yes. I said I would love to do that, and then I started praying my guts out that I would be able to do that very thing. And I kept having in my mind every single time I would get kind of panicked, like, oh, there's no way I can do this. It was in 6 weeks. I think I had 6 weeks, and I thought, I should just say I can't do it. But every time I would have a thought that would come to my mind and say, don't worry, I'm going to take care of it. I'll take care of you. And every single time, and I would actually have kind of like a rush of just like, it would fill me. I don't know. It was quite incredible that I thought, okay, I'll keep going forward. So I kept going forward. Didn't get a lot better, to be honest. And I went to lots of doctors. Anyway, long story. 6 weeks later, it was the day before we started rehearsals in Salt Lake, and it was time to go. I had to be ready. I had been practicing in my room, relearning the choreography, making sure it was fresh. But I really couldn't jump or hop or anything. And I remember this moment where I was out getting ready to feed my chickens, and I thought, I'm just going to try to skip along as I feed my chickens, and I could not skip. It was the day before. I went to bed praying, please help me be able to do this thing, and feeling like I was going to be able to. The next day I went to workshop, time for me to teach. The pain in my ankle was gone, and I was able to dance all summer without pain, and have never experienced the pain since. That's just one. We had another boy that this summer, his family, he was in an accident right before his turn to come. Actually was a brain injury. Do you remember? And was very, very injured. Like, they thought they were going to lose him, and this family was going to come do the family cast, and he was in the hospital. They weren't really sure. Anyway, it doesn't always turn out well, but he was healed, and was able to actually even come with his family a couple days later. It went from, he might die, he might be paralyzed forever, to he was there on set and able to be with us. So those are huge. Those are kind of some huge miracles, but there were so many, like, just what you'd call day-to-day miracles, with people helping each other and, in a way, answering each other's prayers, other things like that are, from the smallest to the biggest. God really is in the details, and you can see it very, very clearly in that setting.
Yeah. Let me ask you sort of this. This is going to be a silly question, but sometimes they lead to nuggets of leadership here. So, if you're speaking to a room full of primary presidents, preparing for a primary program, and when it comes to production and or kids or working with children or just making it a an interesting, dynamic experience. Obviously, we don't expect the same level of Nauvoo pageant in our primary programs. But any advice come to mind is what you'd say to a primary presidency when they're trying to organize an experience that people have for a time being.
Well, I would definitely say that there is nothing that can invite the spirit of the Lord more than a child. And children for us are a hugely important part of the production. And the other side of that is that they are by far the most unpredictable part of getting anything done. When they have needs, those needs have to be met. And so, and I would say maybe by using here's an example from the Nauvoo pageant. We tell parents from the start that your children are the number one concern, and if the dance rehearsal is going and the child has a need, go take care of the need. We'll catch you up later. And if your child is acting out, don't worry about it. We'll keep the child safe. It will work. It will be okay. I remember one night I was at the back of the audience watching, and there's a very reverent moment in the pageants where they're all gathered for a funeral, and music is very tender, and the words are very elevated, and you want a certain kind of feeling. And suddenly a 3-year-old darted out from the group, running toward the edge of the stage. And of course, I'm sure his mother was horrified, and she could do nothing but dart out after him to catch him, to keep him safe. And when she tried to pick him up and return to the group, he resisted and started, yelling and biting her.
Uh-huh.
And so she just wisely just sat there by him and holding him and making sure he couldn't do himself any harm. And I was sure watching her, I thought she's thinking this is a huge blunder that they've just ruined this moment. And it just didn't.
Yeah.
Didn't ruin it. It was like everybody sitting there can look up there and say, yeah, we've all been there before.
Yeah,
That's life.
that's for sure.
That's life.
That's
And
for sure.
that's parenting, and that's love. And the love of God, that's the love of God right there. And that's what our whole message is about. And that's what a primary president needs to do, is recognize that children are unpredictable and they're also amazing. And whatever they do, it has the potential, as long as we demonstrate that we value them and we love them. That's how we teach a child.
Awesome. I've been riffing off the general principles you sent earlier, but as far as like working together and engaging in a greater purpose without ego, because I'm sure if you go to Broadway in New York and see their rehearsals and auditions, there's probably a lot of ego involved there, right? And so in any where a lot of talent is used or recognized, there's sometimes ego creeps up in maybe non-ideal ways. So what comes to mind as far as keeping ego in check, but also working towards this greater purpose?
Okay, well, one of the things that comes to mind is we do have the what we call the core cast, and they're the speakers, and they're there the entire summer, and so there could be a tendency perhaps in some settings for them to be the kind of the stars, right? That they're there to do what they do, and they're the talent maybe. But what I think is beautiful is that really in this setting they're engaged in the work full time. They are servants as well, right? So they lead discussions with their groups. They don't get to sit in the back in the shade while everybody else is up on this hot stage. They're there every day, even though they've done it a million times, right? Going through the actions with people, making sure they know where to go. They're assigned kind of a district and such. And I think that's just kind of facilitates that feeling of we're all in this together, whether it's your first time or your 100th time, we're together. And I feel that it's the same. I think that one of the other things that lends to that is just it is such a purposeful event, right? That the purpose being that we want to well, there's two purposes. It's kind of a logistically, we're learning a logistical show, right? It has its bullet points. This is what we're trying to accomplish. We need to get through certain amounts of blocking to get to the end of the story, to get to the end of the show, right? We need to know the certain amount of music. But then there's also the real purpose then that we've talked about before is the feeling that we're trying to portray and the meaning behind all of these movements and behind the story. And so people come together in that, and it becomes in their kind of vulnerability of, I don't know how to do this, or I need your help to do this. The ego is kind of washed away. We become a team in the effort of getting it done. I'm sure
Yeah,
someone can add to that.
I'll add to that the Chorecast is a really excellent example, as you say. Performing is something that is tempting to the ego, excelling in any way. But when you're on a stage, when you get applause, when you get the role or don't get the role, it's just a very challenging place to keep the ego in check. And when we audition these people, we really are looking for people who can be servant leaders, people who can be on the side as well as in the spotlight. And Amy mentioned their groups. We have the family casts all divided into districts, we call them, of about 12 people or so. Sometimes it's one family if it's a big family. Sometimes it's two or three, households or individuals. And the core cast, with every family cast that rotates through, they have an assignment to lead one of these districts. And so it's their job to make sure everyone is doing okay, that they help them and support them in learning their part on stage. Their minds are turned outward from themselves and from their own performance, because they're looking after all these other people and feeling some measure of responsibility for making sure that those people are having a great experience too. So it's a wonderful system in that way, and so many other aspects of the production function in a similar way. We really can't emphasize enough how much a learning mindset is involved in being able to lead in this situation well. We have to be so very open to the needs of people, to the ideas that are brought forward. It's really essential that we not be there for validation for ourselves.
Yeah. Fascinating. Really, really helpful. Any other point, principle, concept, story we need to make sure we fit in here before we wrap up? Or
I do have something. This is a principle that we came across in the very early days, and as we think about leading saints, I think of the saints of old who led us by the things that they left behind, and who knows, however else they may have been assigned to assist us as we were developing these productions. But Brother Brigham left behind a really wonderful statement that caught our attention. And I won't read you the whole thing, but the essence of it is, he says, when you hear someone complain and vent their feelings, and they yield to that temptation, and they let out the unpleasant sensations to their families and their neighbors, it's not helpful. So he says, make up your minds thoroughly once and for all that all our trials and all our sufferings, we'll let those bits of fruit fall to the ground, and we'll leave them there. We're not going to pick them up and pass them to our neighbor. But he says, if you have blessings, if you have light and intelligence, if you have good things to impart, then let that be the thing that you share with your neighbor. And so and he says, by so doing, you pass this good fruit, and the goodness goes on and on. And it's not a new idea, but it's common. I mean, we know that gossip and frustration and complaining spreads and affects those who are listening. And we also know that beautiful ideas and grateful ideas also bless and help people in getting their work done, and they spread. And so we've kind of ended up calling this a good fruit principle. And we use it in our own leadership, and we encourage it, and we teach it to everyone who comes through the pageant experience. All the volunteers get this training. All of the family cast get this training. And I would say that nothing has done more to create a feeling of Zion than that one principle. And we have seen people go home from the experience so moved by that, bewildered at how impactful it was. And it doesn't mean you can't solve problems, because problems come up and they have to be solved. But we teach the principle, if there's a problem, take it to the person who can do something about it. So don't turn to your neighbor and complain about your costume, and go to the costumers and they'll help you. And the costumers are trained that when someone comes in with a problem, be responsive to them and let's help them, let's solve their problem. Or if you got your feelings hurt by somebody, and if you don't feel you can talk to them, well, think of the next person standing by, one of the leaders, maybe it's a core cast member, maybe it's a director, who you can talk to, who could help you solve that problem, and don't go chattering among your other fellow cast members and letting this thing spread. Let's get it addressed and let's get it solved. And I remember a dentist who came to participate with his family in the pageant and said, I went home and I changed my whole dental practice based on that one principle.
Oh, cool. That's awesome.
And people say their whole families were changed by it. They started functioning in a totally different way. I'm still trying to master it. I think Amy's got it down pretty well.
Not at all. Not at all. But it is amazing what just assuming, I think along with the good fruit is just assuming the best of people. And like Cynthia said, we know this. We already know this. And I think that, but it's, I always think of Nauvoo as kind of like a condensed timeline. It's like being in a laboratory where you can kind of condense the timeline and see if principles really work, because it's so intense. It might be like the same thing if you were in a ward for 10 years, all the interaction that you had with your ward members maybe or working on a project, right? It's condensed down into these 2 weeks, but all the principles are the same, right? Assume the best of people, have faith, do good, work hard, put in effort, follow the commandments, right? But you can see in this condensed timeline how they work, and they really do. It's in an inspiring way. You can see how it works. So I think just as you're talking about, in a youth setting, and I'm in the young women right now, I work with the young women in my ward, and I just think that the principles are so applicable. We really just want that feeling of charity within our wards and within, and when we have that, then the Spirit is accessible. And then when the Spirit is accessible, then the teachers, leaders, relationships are able to function better, because the Spirit's really the one that's talking, not the leaders, right? It's the hearts are open to feel what the Spirit needs to tell them, and I think that's it's clear to see. You can see it work, I guess, is the idea.
Yeah, awesome, really good stuff. So if people are listening to this, do you have for the family cast and things? Is there a long waiting list for that? I imagine this is a popular activity for families, or if people do want to get involved, how do they do that?
Yeah, it's too late for 2025, unfortunately. The applications open at the beginning of September and they close at the end of October. And about 1 in 5 get selected. And many people do have to apply many times. That said, those who are doing that selection do keep track of how many times a person has applied or a family has applied, and they do try to spread the opportunities around. And so if someone has the potential to be persistent, the day may come.
And I've had people ask me, what's the secret ingredient? Like, how do I get my family in? So I think it's, if you are turned away, don't be offended, right? It's actually, and Cynthia, you can obviously correct this if it's wrong, but it's kind of a logistical thing as well as a spiritual matter, right? Because they're trying to figure out we need a certain amount of men to build the temple on the stage. We need a certain amount of women to be able to do this. We need, if we have more children, then, we need a certain amount of each demographic, I guess you could say, so that it will actually function logistically. And then, of course, they have their minds and hearts open spiritually. I know they pray about each
Very
cast,
much.
and you can see as the cast comes together that they were meant to be there that week with those people, and so it's both things. It's both logistic and spiritual.
Yeah.
But don't give up, I think, is the
So
key.
just because your last name's Osmond doesn't mean they put you on the top of the stack or anything, you know. So
Well,
just keep going and they'll come around.
there people, we do use some of the talents that they bring, and so we like to know what those are. But
Oh, cool.
it isn't the clincher. It's
Yeah.
it's a whole array of features.
Factors,
I,
yeah.
I would add that, we start choosing for performers. If there are performers who want to be involved, then in January we have our audition period, and the auditions there's an initial audition period, and then there's a callback audition, and then it takes us about a month. Because this is not just a show, we take quite a while to get it all cast. We do a lot of visiting with the individuals that we're looking at. We read them, in some cases, multiple times. We are looking for people that have the capacity to come in and work very hard under difficult circumstances and live in cramped quarters and make all those sacrifices, who can also do the job on stage that needs to be done. So that happens in January and February, and I think if people want to look into that, they can Google Nauvoo Pageant Corecast auditions, and they should be able to find it through that means.
Perfect. Yeah, love it. Awesome. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to share some of these experiences and stories and principles. I think this is really there. Anybody in any leadership or church calling can learn from your experience. So I've got one more question for you, and I'll let you both answer it individually. And that is, and I'll start with you, Amy. As you reflect on your time as a leader in the context of the Nauvoo pageant, how has being a leader helped you become a better follower of Jesus Christ?
I think that the position that I'm able to be in Nauvoo there, you can call it a leader, but it's really just it's part of the team, I would say. But from that position, I'm able to really have the perspective of seeing how much God loves each person, right? And like I'm able to see and I hear a lot of the stories, right? And there's so many I don't hear, but a lot of the stories of the people, what brought them to the pageants, what kind of things they're going on in their lives, and just hearing those things and seeing them and seeing their amazing acts of faith that bring them to the pageant, or that bring them to the pageant, has helped me in two ways: want to be better, want to be as faithful as they are, and be a better follower of our Savior, but also to recognize more clearly His hand in my life. I can see it very clearly, and have so much gratitude. When you feel that kind of gratitude, want to be even a better follower, and dedicate myself more to his service.
Cynthia, what about you? How's being a leader at the Nauvoo pageant helped you become a better follower of Jesus Christ?
Well, I'm glad I had a time to reflect on that while Amy talked. I feel like it has made me aware of how people are watching us. I think one of the hardest things about taking the director's role for me has been having to get up in front of people every day and do things. It feels a little risky and exposed. And yet, Shakespeare said the world is a stage. And I like to think of that as a truth, that we are all here on the earth playing out a part, and that there is an audience, and people are watching us. We're watching each other. We're learning from each other, and it has heightened my awareness that at any moment it could be walking. It could be pumping gas into my car. It could be meeting someone in the hallway at church, or it can be while I'm standing in front of a group of cast members in Nauvoo, teaching them, that I may say something that could alter somebody's perspective that day or change their perspective for a lifetime. Any of us can do that at any moment. And that if we have taken upon ourselves that responsibility to be disciples of Jesus and be like him, then that's the mindset we need to try to carry with us. It's very difficult for me. It's an ongoing challenge, but it definitely has heightened that awareness in my life that leading doesn't stop when I stop teaching that group of 100, 200 people. It follows me out the door wherever I go.